Welcome to Helping Organizations Thrive. Today I have the pleasure of Van Carlson on the show. Welcome to you, Van.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to get on your show. Looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, it's good to see you. I was going to tell people about you. You are the founder and CEO of Strategic Risk Alternatives and have over 25 years of experience within the risk management industry. And your business helps manage risk more effectively with tax deferred dollars. So I'm talking to an American. That's why we're talking dollars here. We will be exploring later on how a risk management approach can enable companies to thrive and tap into your many years of experience of working with organizations. But before we go there, I would just like to understand what you love about what you do, Van.
You know what I love most is really like the audience you work with, right? That's small to middle market business owners, bringing strategies that large companies utilize, and bringing that knowledge education to those risk takers that have ran those smaller businesses, and that's what I like most. So it's an educational process. It's educating the business owners. Um, and bringing more better solutions to the risk takers out that we have not only in this country but all around the world. That risk is real, and how do you mitigate that is an important aspect of the survival of your business. And that's what I love about it, and I love working with that group of entrepreneurs and risk takers mostly. I'm always curious on how people do things or how they make a living, and I'm always amazed by it. And at the same time, they bring unique risk to their business that maybe they're not aware of. As big companies go, obviously they have risk managers on staff and they have a fleet of attorneys normally. Most of the clients that we work with, they try to avoid those people, unfortunately, because they get billed by the hour. So um, that's been a benefit. That's been a great elevating of our professionalism in risk management, and it's been a great experience. Very fortunate to be in this space, actually. So
Excellent. Well, obviously, you talk with passion, you talk with experience and expertise there. And obviously, any business, to grow and to move forward, there's always a risk to that, to a growth plan. And certainly entrepreneurs are probably more bent on being a bit more riskier because they've set out on their own, and whether they've gone from a solopreneur to owning a huge company, they've made that risk. I'd like to get an understanding from your perspective of what you deem as risk management, and what do you think of risk takers in business?
well, I'll address the last part. I don't think we have enough risk takers, right? And at the end of the world, at the end of the day, it's a risk reward calculation, right? I mean, like the longer you do anything, you start to realize everything you look at is a math problem, and how you um, calculate that math is critical. And one of the calculations you have to go into is risk management. Is how do you, if I can mitigate it, that increases and it doesn't necessarily take away from the reward, right? You can have it's like in any investment, right? The less risk I take, the more reward I'm going to have, right? And the more risk I take, the greater reward I have, right? I mean, it's just, and it's true in any investments. And I look at business in general as an investment. I hope it, I never look at an expense, even though we book things in our businesses as an expense. An expense is really an investment into your business, right? You need a rate of return, you need an ROI, you need all these things calculated, and you need to measure those things. We need to also measure the risk, and if I can mitigate it, I'll take the risk more. And so that's one thing. So when the risk takers that are out there, bringing this education knowledge to them that they can mitigate it somehow through tools that are available to them. And there's a lot of emerging risk out there, right? I mean, we're seeing it today probably more so than ever in our lifetime, in my professional life, between the COVID-19 issues being forced to shut down your businesses, to supply chain risk, and then not only on top of all that, you had brand protection today's because of the way we're plugged into all this information and social media outlets. It takes years to build a good brand, but it takes seconds to destroy. And then on top of all that, the cyber risk that we all take on with our businesses, from small to major enterprises, is pretty vast. And so traditional insurance companies have always done a really good job with the hard, we call it the tangible assets of the business. It's the intangible assets we want to look at. And most business owners value the intangible assets more so than the tangible. And what I mean by tangibles, buildings, hard assets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where contracts, intellectual property, supply chain risk, or supply chains that I have, contracts, and relationships, and is more important to the business owners typically. So that's really the biggest thing when it comes down to is when looking at risk at a much broader scheme than
Mm-hmm.
just what you're used to. And I think too, it's important to note that I'm a risk taker, even though it maybe goes against risk managers' natures. Typically, when I deal with CPAs and other risk managers, they're conservative by nature. But I will tell you,
I was going to say, your profession is probably more risk averse, I guess. Is that typical, or am I just being stereotyping you?
no, I think it's more typical. I think it's I do consider myself more of an entrepreneur, only because I started a company conceptually that didn't exist. Meaning that we do take advantage of some specific tax codes in the U.S. that warrants the risk management and gives you much more and better position for business owners, and take advantage of a little known tax code called 831B. But that's here in the U.S. But we obviously won't talk about that too much, but just know that there's a lot of tools out there that bring this into play. But it also spins up my entrepreneurial ways, right? I used to run a property casualty agency, pretty successful here in the States. But it was this cookie cutting stuff, right? I mean, it was off the shelf general liability policies, product liability, all the stuff that goes into that. But then when the '08 hit here in the US, it was devastating to a lot of our small to middle market business owners.
Mm.
I figured there had to be a better way and it really starts to recognize the financial risk business owners take. And God knows there's plenty of that. And sometimes it doesn't come to light until it happens. And I think COVID-19 obviously showed itself to say that, I am self-insuring a lot of risk. How do I make that more effectively, more manageable? And really, from my standpoint, when you have these adversities show up and you survive it, you do become a better business owner on the back end of things. You become
Mm.
more efficient, you become more streamlined. You try to get out of your box. You start to realize boxes are dangerous, to get yourself in a box. So I think, like, listening to shows like yours, for example, all those things business owners have to stop constantly staying engaged with. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people just get into the blinder situation, and unfortunately they get blindsided. But um, so that's really where I think the risk management comes into business owners, is just letting them aware of what's going on out there and what's the possibilities. Back in the day, I would be sitting with clients, and I jokingly said this, but it's true. I could pretty much talk about anything, because I was always, what will go wrong, what could go wrong. In my industry, in risk management, we've been with the fires, we've been with people that have killed people in auto accidents, and unexpected death, and destruction, and all those unfortunate things that come up. And I've been involved in situations where I was the first one they called. They didn't even call their family members. Dire situations. Things do happen,
Mm.
and how do you survive those on the back end is not only from your business standpoint, but from a personal standpoint. And so I can't emphasize enough, risk is real. Business entrepreneurs, business risk takers, and so forth. There's two things that you have to have in my mind to be a successful business owner. One is you have to be willing to take risk, and you have to have a short-term memory, right? I mean, I jokingly say this all the time, but if you remembered all the trials and tribulations you to get to this point, you'd probably sit back and go, man, I think I would have been better off just having a mail route and delivering mail. What I mean? Why take all this risk? But now that you're here, you can appreciate. But you forget all those things, right? I mean, you do. I mean, you couldn't get up every day and think about all the fires you got to put out, or all the fires you put out a year ago, and you build on those experiences, luckily, and running the business becomes easier for you on a time basis,
Mm.
only because you experienced those things in the past. So, but you got to go through the grind to get there and get that, education. We call it, you have a junior college education or a Harvard education, meaning what are those decisions or lack of decisions you made um, cost you? And that's really where, unfortunately, education can be expensive. But that's why we're trying to here to help mitigate some of that education, bring our experience to business owners, and say, hey, this is stuff you're self-insuring risk for. How do you make that more effectively and more efficiently in your
Mm.
business? And recognize it, really truthfully recognize it first off.
You mentioned about you don't think there's enough people taking risks out there. And it's great to hear that from you. And I obviously appreciate you took a risk yourself. You set up your own business, and you're walking the talk, so to speak. Businesses out there right now, and whether they are owner managed or slightly bigger than that in terms of more of a corporate size, how would you help them get to a place where they start taking more risks? Because we know that there is a risk and reward sort of equation. The more risks you take, obviously in the right places, there's usually bigger rewards. So what would the sort of things we think about to enable that to happen? And I say that in a safe way, managed way. That's almost feels against anyway, in a way that's more appropriate to building business from your perspective, from your interactions with businesses and how you've built your own business as well.
I think it gets back to the calculated risk, right? I think the calculated risk is, the more, you can't do the paralysis by analysis, obviously. At some point, you just got to jump off, right? But I think the more variables you can put into that calculation, that math problem I was talking about earlier, the more better educated, the better, the unforeseens, the more you can identify those.
Hmm.
Does those decisions give you the ability to take that risk more effectively? Because now you ran through all the scenarios the best you can by having outside people. Obviously, anytime you jump off on something, the better team, the better people around you, the more consulting you can have. The equation becomes more calculated to the point where um, the risk is worth taking. And to me, that's really what I would tell all business owners, or anybody, any startups or any entrepreneur minded. Again, they every day they got to get up and charge the mountain, right? They can't look back. They got to get up to the top and as fast as they can. That's just their mentality. And God bless them for it, right? But at the same time, that's probably one of the challenges we have sometimes. It's not kicking people in the butt. Sometimes it's the fact that they just blindly jump off, right? And again, you know, uh, we need more of that. But again, I think it's, to calculate the risk, take the risk more effectively, more seriously, and really start to. And what happens is for us is a lot of clients that, like right now we got an issue right now with receivables, right? A lot of clients are worried about receivables they have because there's been such a lag in supply chain, that what's happening now is, if they're going to get their stuff 6 months from now, are the consumers going to want it, right? A good example I think was Christmas decorations here in the States. It didn't hit the mark. It didn't hit it was still stuck in containers offshore, and a lot of Christmas. Well, are you going to hold that over for this year if you're a retailer to bring it into your supply chain of your stores or do you fire sell it and get rid of it today? Those are all things that are new to a lot of business owners, but I think it also brings up the issue with supply chain today, and how do you manage that? And do I have a plan in place when these things happen? Do I have to divert to other suppliers? What does that look like?
Hmm.
And this challenges you, but once you have all those things in line, it definitely gives you more confidence to take on more risk. Truthfully.
And we've just been obviously talking about the business owner taking the risk, and that's great, and they can have a plan. They look at mitigations. How can they create a culture of risk taking in their organization? Because that becomes, I think a bigger challenge is to take it from the owner, who then cascades it down to whether that's 5, 10, or 100 people in their business. How can we create that sort of culture that will foster an environment where people are willing to really take a risk and really take a jump off, calculated, that looked into the detail? Because in some ways, if everything's down to the owner or the CEO, then it's sort of a bit of a bottleneck, really, isn't it? It almost sort of holds everything up. It's down to the CEO just doing all the risk taking and all the driving forward. So, in your experience, I mean, you might in your own business, how have you done that in terms of creating that sort of culture of risk taking?
It's interesting on that because I think that's probably, and you point out a very probably one of the biggest challenges anybody has, especially if you get to a certain period of, we'll call it a plateau, and you still want to charge that mountain, but you're on a plateau, right? How do you become, uh, um, you're the one that's keeping the vision going, but how do you have other people buy into that vision? And part of that buying into that vision is absolutely taking on more risk. One of the things that I do, and this is not something I set out mindful of. I just assume that if I always put myself in position of other with staff I hire, and I've got a great dynamic team. I'm very lucky. They're very young relative to what we see out in the world today. And I'm fortunate that they're money motivated, and I absolutely have to give them more reward for the risk they're going to take. And so I think it comes into forms of uh, how do you build your matrix for bonus structures and everything else to where they want to take that risk, and I think culturally speaking, um, I've been lucky. It's crazy to think, when I first started this, I tell people all the time, we're a 14-year overnight success story. But like I was saying earlier, there's been a lot of grind getting to this
You've
point.
got long nights in America, then.
But
You have long nights, 14 nights,
oh
14
yeah,
years.
yeah, trust me. In fact, yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's been one of those things where, um, when you look back, it flew, right? But a lot of the things that we learned along the way, and somehow we developed that culture in our staffing where, you know, they now buy into the vision more than I have. Meaning, when you start out a business, you have some numbers in your head, you have some goals in mind, and then when you hit them, you're sitting around going, "Oh, I thought I was reaching for the stars, and now I got staff that wants reach for the unknown universes." Where it's been exciting. We're sitting in staff meetings, and I hear where they want to go and how many clients they want to put on the books, and what we're capable of doing on a scalable basis and all those things. And so some of that has to do with me being extremely open with my staff, not
Mm.
pulling anything back, and engaging them on all sorts of different levels, not just looking at the bottom lines. Again, anytime you put in an expense on the on your sheets for your business, it better be an investment. And we've invested very well into our staffing. We've got good technology, and I've been fortunate. But when it comes to biting off on your team, but wanting to take on more risk, I think it's got to be reward for them too. And if you don't have that culture, if you don't believe in that, I do think you're going to have either huge turnover on staffing, and it won't. Today in today's world, man, it's different for us here in the U.S., right? I mean, my dad used to be the guy that worked 70 hours a week, and he ran his own convenience store, and maybe he had two people working for him, and it would be mostly to go to church and watch us play football on Friday nights. Other than that, he was down at the store every day working. you know Nobody wants to work like that anymore, and I don't blame them. But so there's all sorts of things you got to bring into your culture, your business today: benefits, time off, the ability to not micromanage anybody, but give them a task, and if you get the task done, go home. There's no reason to be here. So there's all of that needs to come into play as well.
Mm.
And it's not easy to do because sometimes it's beating your head that work harder is better. Well, I'd rather work smarter. And I think the people you need to hire need to have that same kind of philosophy and belief as well. And I've been lucky in that regard.
It's good to hear that you are open with your team, that has enabled them to, not just shoot for the stars and moon, but they're shooting for other universes, which, I mean, going beyond perhaps your expectations, and which is brilliant. Now, when they do that, and I'm sure it's happened, and they make a mistake and they fail, how have you dealt with that? How have you dealt with that individual, and as a team and as a business as well?
Learning experience. I mean, unfortunately, it's just the way we're all wired, right? We don't learn much from wins. We always learn things. It's when winning has always been, and I always lived what Michael Jordan always said about it. And it's so true to me about winning. But any time in my life, it's been more of a relief than a reward. I don't know if that makes sense for people, but you expect to win. Yeah, I expect to win. I mean, I'm not going to, why the hell play the game if you don't expect to win? And so from my standpoint, but when you lose, you again, you do learn a lot more. And I think, we see it with our sales teams, where we bring somebody in. This is a concept. It's an experience. It's a learning curve, and the learning curve can be steep. And part of that learning is failing. And the biggest adage I always, I'm growing up in my high school years, I had a teacher that always said, learn by doing. And that's true. I mean, you can't. Some of this stuff is not driven by a manual, or not driven by, if X happens, do Y. I mean, that doesn't happen a lot of times, especially in the dynamic world that we're in today. Until it's like raising a kid. There is no perfect way, right? But you just got to go do it and do the best you can. And here's the biggest guiding thing I think I tell anybody is, if you can do the right thing, just do the right thing. Life's a hell of a lot simpler. And it's doing the right thing for your client. At the end of the day, your client's got to be the one to win here. And if you don't put your client in a position to win, then you're going to lose too. And that's really where I think that's got to be the driver. Believe me, we've turned clients that, hey, this isn't going to work. And when we're out presenting, and it's another tool in the tool chest, guys, is all this is. For the right client, it's a great tool. But not all tools fit the same situation, obviously.
No.
People don't only have one wrench in their toolbox, right? So that's really the emphasis I would tell my team is, and make mistakes, talk about them, bring them light to other people. And the biggest advantage is I've had over the 20 some odd years being in risk management is really learning from other business owners, either missteps or decisions they made that I was able to learn from. And again, I've been very fortunate in that regard, and I've been open to that. And I think that's another thing too, business owners, entrepreneurs have to be available to is, are they open to learning from other people's mistakes and observing those things, so you don't step in the same potential landmines as your peers or other people that you've. So I think it's always important to have people around you, influencers, and listening again to shows like yourself is. I think it's huge for businesses, and unfortunately, a lot of us don't do it enough.
No, and it's interesting because I think when we're pushing the boundaries, whether that's innovation or driving our business, there's a risk in all of that. If you are genuinely pushing the boundaries, you will make mistakes. You won't get it right first time. That technology, that way of working, and you're right. I think that's good that you have that sense of. Use it as an opportunity to learn. If we've failed or it's not quite, I tend to use the word, it's feedback. We just haven't got there quite yet. And was it Thomas Edison said, I tried 1,000 times, and then he created the light bulb and stuff. And so it's using it as a learning experience. And if people know that it's okay to fail in a culture and in an environment, then people will push the boundaries. And we'll shoot for the stars, moons, and everything else. So that's really important. Just going a bit more back to risk management. Do people think is it all about money, or is it bigger than just money? It feels like risk is all about money.
No, I would say it's not. and I would say it's more. I mean, if you're developing a culture, and I say this in front of business owners all the time, as a business owner, entrepreneur, we rise for, on the other side. We're successful, things are going well, and you built a good cohesive team. Not only do you owe it to your business on the bottom lines, everything else, but you owe it to your team. What happens if you didn't analyze it fully on the risk management side and you went blindly down the road? Who else are you putting at risk now? Uh, Not only career-wise, financially, and everything else. I mean, everybody in your team has hopes and dreams as well, personally, right? And part of the reason why they're there is that they're hoping through financials that you help them get in there. And so, to me, I always tell clients all the time, you owe it to your business, you owe it to the risk you took, honor respect the risk you took to get here. And now also, you owe it to your employees as well. And so, I think, if you build that team, you have that family. I hate to say family but it is. I mean, I guess for better lack of word, that's really what it becomes, right? They're just as important people in your life as your own kids in a lot of ways, or your siblings, or anybody else around you, that you care for them and you want to make sure that things work out for them as well. And so for me, it's the thing is too. I think that the entrepreneurs, the business owners, that get to a certain point in their life, and fortunately I'm there, is I get more reward out of, to your point, money's money, great, all that. But I would also argue that making money was never been, I hate to sound, it kind of sounds arrogant, but it's never been a hard thing, right? I mean, there's just certain personalities that are out here that, they will find a way. I mean, it's just, and I kind of put myself in that camp. But the ones that you bring into your team and you see them benefit from it's much more rewarding helping people today get to a certain level, professionally, be able to afford to send their kids to college potentially. All of these things are more rewarding to me now than, I would say, going out and signing on a new client. In fact, what's funny is I'm not a very good salesman anymore. I used to be the only guy, right? I used to be the one out plugging this thing. I tell clients I'd be like the worst guy you could talk to now about our products, and I recognize that because I'm maybe not as hungry as I used to be, but I certainly have a team that is, and that's great. But that's been an interesting epiphany I've had to deal with, as somebody that can feel like I feel very confident in our products and everything else, but I'm just not nearly as hungry as I used to be. And but at the same time, I find more rewarding, helping people around me now elevate themselves. That to me has been something that I wouldn't expected. And now that I'm at a point, I enjoy that part probably more so than anything else.
Yeah, we're probably similar. I mean, I think in my career, I always, towards the end, I think, started to think, actually, I have more reward or seeing somebody else take flight, unlock their potential. And now when I have clients and I see them, break down limiting beliefs, or they excel on something, or their business starts to grow, or they just go into new ventures, and I've been sort of part of helping them, that to me is hugely rewarding, rather than just the success of me. Actually, I think it's for me, it's that almost duplication of and sort of your capacity and expressing it in a different way. I've really enjoyed talking about risk management. I like it that it's an important thing to have in a business. I think we need to be risky in the sense and go for it, but there's a sense of balance and mitigation, and obviously give some thought. But I think having that environment where you allow mistakes and failures to happen, not obviously you want to breed that, but you got to have an environment that can be okay. It's okay to fail, okay to fall down. I've enjoyed talking to you today, Van. And if people want to connect with you and get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing
that? Well, that's sorry, that was my dog barking. 831b.com is our website, and that's really the best way to get a hold of us. 831b.com, and There's educational videos on kind of what we do more in depth there, but I think it's a great way to obviously reach out to me directly. You can go to our team and find me there. But 831b.com is our web domain, and that's the best place they can get to me.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time today, Van. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. Appreciate the conversation.